Hello there, guys, and welcome back to my channel for, well, what's weird, a preview of a Chelsea game, because we just had a weekend where we didn't play, but Chelsea still didn't leave us alone. They still had to make us miserable. Now, I've calmed down a little bit since the last time we streamed, and I was absolutely furious, shooting left, right, and centre, because I was this short list of apparent managers that we were interested in. I mean, I just lost the plot, honestly. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I still think the short list is a whole, just gimme by the club, where you're like, you might not like Pochettino, but you still prefer him to Kompany and Postecoglou. So I still think it's a lot of horse crap, for being perfectly honest, those two names. That in the case that we are seriously considering them to be appointed now. But now we have two things to talk about. I say that. It's about 17 things. But mainly, Pochettino to be announced as Chelsea manager very soon, whenever that may be. We'll find out. I assume not tomorrow because we have a game. So probably Thursday, Friday, maybe the weekend, because, again, we don't have a game on the weekend. But, of course, we also need to talk about Chelsea versus Brentford. We've got 7 more games left to get 1 more point and hit the big 40. Let's see if we can do it. Probably not. But, that is a different debate for a different day. Ollie, you know what? I'll start with you. Thank you for being back on. I appreciate it very much. Obviously, I've seen some of your tweets about it, but I haven't necessarily spoken to you about it in terms of what you think of, I guess, the managerial situation at Chelsea. So it's not been confirmed, but, all the most reliable journalists are essentially saying it's very close to being done. So we have to assume at this point that Mauricio Pochettino will become the new Chelsea manager and will take over from Frank Lampard at the start of preseason. So just for people that aren't sure about this, he's not taking over now. He will take over at the start of the next season. Your thoughts? I put a poll in the chat as well. Like, are you happy? Are you annoyed? Is it just let me wait and see before I have a conclusive opinion? Where do you stand on the situation, mate?
It's a difficult one. First of all, thanks for having me on, of course. It's nice to be here with the boys, and big up everyone in the chat as well. Make sure you smash a like down below, do all the things you got to do. In terms of Poch, it's an interesting one. I was originally very anti-Poch. I was, serial bottler, no way that he could ever be the right manager for Chelsea. But I've had a little bit more time to reflect. I've had some time to think about it. And on paper, given the choices available to Chelsea at this point, it seems like the most sensible choice. It's, obviously after Nagelsmann and Enrique both are not in the race anymore, Poch seems like a sensible choice. We know he's pretty good at doing wonders with young players. We have a lot of young players. His situation that he went into Spurs in the first place is not dissimilar to the situation we are in now, where we have a big squad with a lot of youngsters who needs a little bit of direction. The other thing I like about Poch is that his teams always fight hard. They're always very passionate. You could say they're a bit sort of shithousery. There's that oomph and that grit, and I feel like he could provide that as well. There's a lot of question marks, though. In theory, it makes sense, and it's somewhat of a sensible appointment. But you can't always shake the fact that there is a bit of Spurs in him. But what I will say to that is, worst comes to worst, he's probably not going to be here forever. It might be good, it might be a disaster. It's kind of hard to tell.
Exactly, that's kind of where I sit as well. Similar boat to you. When it first came out, I was like, absolutely no chance should we be getting Pochettino. But at the time, we had other options who I preferred. Now, we don't really. And I'm like, okay, I mean, obviously, everyone lives their life differently. Everyone thinks of things differently. But I'm like, well, so what benefit do I have from now just being miserable until he gets sacked again? So I will try to look at the positives that there are. The more you look into it, you'll find some more pros, you find some more cons. That's what we have Connor here for today, to maybe shed some more light on those pros and those cons. But before I get to Connor, I'll get to you in a minute, mate. Let me get to you, Pice. Thank you for being back on. You've also made it very clear that you've been, especially in the beginning, very much against Poch. Like you've just explained off air to us. You've kind of not really warmed to it. It's definitely the wrong word, but you've kind of just had to accept, well, this is what's happening. And like I just said, you then try to find positives within it. So whereabouts do you sit on the situation now? Because there is still some that are drastically against it. There is a lot of people that are incredibly for it, which I'm still a little bit surprised by, why some people think Pochettino is this god. I find that a bit odd. But anyway, each to their own. So where do you sit at this moment in time, Pice?
Well, I think, like you said, to be honest, except that it's happening. Well, it looks like it's happening. It's not official yet, but seems to be close to obviously reaching the agreement, contracts close, and that sort of thing. and then just try and find positives from it. I definitely have a lot of worries of how it will turn out with the fans, especially if we go through that bad patch. Initially, I feel like, Graham Potter kind of had it hard in himself, to be honest, because he was obviously the guy replacing Thomas Tuchel. All the fans loved, and I just feel like that turned toxic pretty quickly. So, like, if you think of Pochettino, like, I feel like he's going to be under double the pressure from day one from Chelsea fans just to get it right, just because of those Spurs links. And I don't even know whether it's, fair to judge him off that or not, but that is how it will be. And I've tried to explain that to people. Some fans will be, so what? Look at Glenn Hoddle type thing. He came in, laid the foundations for the club. He was ex-Spurs. Other people will be like, F Poch, ex-Spurs guy, like how I was. I didn't want him here, to be honest with you. But, there are some interesting factors, I would say. Like, if you look at Pochettino's time at Southampton and Spurs, which Connor did a good article for me on my website about it. He looked at, like, specifically the players he developed, and I think the budgets he worked on was the most impressive thing, because at Tottenham, I think he probably overachieved. Well, he definitely did overachieve with the budget he had. And I think obviously in the end, it got toxic between him and Levy. And I think the exciting thing, if there is an exciting thing, is like, what can Poch do with like a bigger budget, with a bigger backing type thing? Because if he can compete for the league, albeit a few years ago, get to a Champions League final with that type of squad, like if you look at the Spurs lineup in the Champions League final, it's not that good of a team, to be quite honest with you. I don't, it's not a Champions League final team, in my opinion. And I think if he can do that with that sort of budget, that sort of backing, like, what can he do with us type thing with these owners? I think that's like the exciting or intriguing thing about the appointment, I would say.
No, I do agree, mate. I do agree. There's obviously a few questions and a few question marks, I guess is the better word to use. So I'll get to you, Connor. First of all, please tell the people who you are, what you do. Before I'll ask you to, like, analyze or tell us what you found in your research, I'd rather your actual personal opinion, just to clear it up to people. You are also a Chelsea fan, not like your expert, for example, a neutral that just analyzes football. What's your position on the Pochettino thing? And I'll add one thing on top of what Pice has just said in terms of what he's done with the budget, and also bringing that back to something that Ollie said earlier in terms of the Chelsea on too dissimilar of a situation compared to what Tottenham were when he took over there. One question that I guess there is, and I'd love to know what you think about that, is we are in somewhat similar situations, but what's different is, yes, we have young players, but we have young players that a lot of people consider the best young players in the world, and Tottenham didn't have that. Now, will that change how likely he is and how good he's going to be at improving them? The fact that they are kind of the top echelon of talents rather than just talented players. Of course, you have to be talented to make it to Spurs in the first place as well, but maybe not quite the levels of talent as an Enzo Fernandez or a Mykhailo Mudryk or obviously Reece James, those types of players. So, but yeah, your thoughts on Pochettino in general, him coming to Chelsea, of course, and then maybe touch on that as well, if you see those similarities and if you think that can just be translated from what he did at Spurs to what he hopefully will do with us.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. Obviously, it's my first time doing like a live stream talking about it. I've been doing a lot more writing recently. But yeah, bear with me a little bit. I've been a little bit under the weather the last few days, so if I'm a little bit slow with some things, just bear with. But yeah, first of all, my opinion on Poch is very much two sides of the coin. It's like I can see the positives and the negatives quite clearly. As we've already said, the positives really stand out there. He can bring up the youth that we've already got. We've got a very big squad. We've got a very young squad. It can sort of be morphed into whatever he sort of wants it to be if he's given that direction by the club. So he can do a similar thing to what he did with Tottenham and sort of mold these youth players into the field he wants them to be in. Obviously, the main negative that you guys have already touched on, and I'll just echo that point, is he's ex-Tottenham. So if something goes wrong quickly, it could get really sour in the Chelsea fan base really quickly. We've seen it with Potter, even with Lampard being a club legend. A lot of the fans are unhappy already just because of how that's gone. So I can see, I think if he joins, which obviously he is now, I think it's going to need to be pretty much perfect from the get-go. Otherwise, things could get quite intense quite quickly. But yeah, I do agree with what you said about the youngsters as well. That's quite an interesting point to go into, because obviously when he joined Tottenham, a lot of the players that he was working with, they were either already at the club like homegrown, or you had players like Dele signed for 6 million, Eric Dyer signed for about 4 or 5 million. So like these are players that were nowhere near sort of world beaters at the time. Whereas coming to Chelsea, he's going to have to work with Enzo Fernandez, 100+ million, Mikhailo Mudryk, 70 with chances to rise. Even the likes of Madueke, 30 million. Like these are big buys. These are buys that the board are going to want to get right. Otherwise, it's a lot of money down the drain, really. So
you're used to that, though, right? You know, from PSG, you know, dealing with big players for big money with big egos.
Yeah,
that's exactly my point, though. Because sorry to interrupt you guys, because I think we're almost in the middle of what Spurs are and what PSG are. Because PSG have a lot of expensive players, but a lot of more finished product players. Now, I guess you could argue Mbappe is obviously still very young, and to some extent, when especially Poch was there, still a bit of a talent. But obviously, with who Mbappe is, kind of still different, if that makes sense. But like I say, they're more like towards the end of like the finalized players, while Spurs had like the good players that were young, and we have like these potential superstars where it's like that's where I see us kind of in the middle of the two. Wouldn't you agree with that, Ollie? Before we take it back to Connor.
Yeah, I would. I think we sort of sit in that sort of like middle zone, and you know, and going back to what Connor was saying, that's why to a certain degree it's so important that he hits the ground running, because we don't want another manager who you know can't or won't work with the squad we've got, because we've spent a lot of money on it now. So yeah, it's really important for the next manager to be able to actually come in, look at what we've got, and build something a bit more cohesive. You know, if he doesn't hit the ground running straight away, it's going to be very, very toxic. But I would urge everyone to try and get behind him, even if you don't like him as a person, even if you don't like him as a coach. You know, I think we have to give Chelsea the best opportunity to do well. And to do that, I think we've all kind of got to at least try to get behind the manager for day one. You know, it might change after that. People might, you know, could lose 8-0 and everyone's out on him straight away. But I think it'd be a smart idea to hopefully get the fan base a bit more united for a change.
No, I agree with that completely. Like, obviously, everyone will have their opinions, like you touched on. But to start with, just try to back it. You know, try to back it, see where it goes. If it goes bad, you can still voice that you hate it and you want him gone or whatever. That's okay. But while we don't know how it's going to go, don't try to cloud negative judgment before we actually see how it's going to go. Connor, we interrupted you there. Is there anything that you wanted to elaborate on that before we move on to your talking about
no.
more detail?
So just going back to the homegrown talent thing, I think actually, like you said, I think we're in the middle. I think that is a really key area to highlight, that we are sort of between what Tottenham had when he first joined there and what PSG had. Because when he joined PSG, of course, it more so they wanted to compete instantly. He had the pressure to compete straight away, to win a Champions League, to continue to win the league that they do so often. So whereas we're sort of in that boat where fans just want to see progression now. Like we've put so much money in. We're trying to bring up this squad. We're trying to get a new manager who can bring the squad with him and sort of build as an identity. And I think fans now really just want to see progression. That's like under Potter, that was all they was looking for this season. Once things turned very sour, Champions League was looking at question. A lot of fans were just looking for the positives in the way we were playing and the like certain personnel that he liked. So yeah, I do think definitely we're in the middle of those two phases. And can he come in and put his Tottenham spin on us in terms of bringing the youth out of the club, but also not come with the trophy voodoo that we don't want, because we don't want to turn up as another Spurs.
No, we really don't, and that's, I think, one of the most important points, arguably. Pies, let me take it back to you with the super chat from Isaac as well. As obviously we see on screen from Fabrizio Romano, he says Mauricio Pochettino to Chelsea is close to here we go. Positive talks yesterday on Monday night. Poch is prepared to say yes to Chelsea. It's closer than ever. We've also had reported the last couple of days that he's told kind of his staff that were his staff at both Tottenham, PSG, and previously as well, to kind of get ready type thing. And Isaac asked an interesting question, because Fabrizio used the term manager job. Do you think that it's actually a manager, or do you think it will be another head coach? Because, and then Isaac elaborates, think they have more control as a manager. Now, before I let you answer that, Pies, I think Fabrizio using it, that's just Fabrizio not being, English not being his first language. So we just all of us call it manager. Whether English is our first language or not, we just call it manager, even though sometimes they're head coaches, sometimes they are managers. But I do still find it an interesting point, right? Because I feel like I can't remember where the reports have come from. That's what I'm going to ask you about now, Pies. that he might have a little more control than maybe like Potter did. I still think it will be a head coach situation because I don't think Bowley really wants a clear out manager because, I don't know, that might give them almost too much power. But how do you see that one? Because Bowley has elaborated many a times that they want a manager that is willing to collaborate with them on more topics than just what happens on the football pitch and the training pitch, right? So I guess maybe he wants a bit of a mix of, you know, the old school manager and the old school head coach.
Yeah, I think this question's really interesting because obviously we won't know the full details of what exactly they want from the coach or manager, whoever they appoint and whatever job title they give him. But I think what we know is clear is that, you know, they ain't going to employ a manager, first off, that is unhappy with them at the training ground, that type of thing. The owners want to be involved. I think that Pochettino will have to connect very regularly, maybe twice, 3 times a week with the hierarchy, with the owners. I just think they want a good communicator and someone that doesn't or will almost never get, you know, annoyed at them, I guess.
Someone who will answer the WhatsApp messages.
But it's an interesting one. It's a hard question to answer, to be fair. But what I was going to say is, like, for example, Julian Nagelsmann. Like, I thought he would be quite a good, quite a good person, quite a good fit because of what he said about Bayern in terms of how they recruit players and how they work together with the board and the owners there. I can't remember their names. Like, there's a few of them, Oliver Kahn and that sort of lot. And I read that quote and I thought, okay, he's probably going to be, you know, the best fit for us. And then the reports came out that one of the reasons why he pulled out was that he had major concerns with our transfer recruitment policy and how we do things. And I was thinking, like, just that's like red flags. But then if Pochettino's okay with that, then, you know, that's, you know, potentially something that, you know, hopefully we'll find out more about. So, yeah, I think a lot of it is kind of difficult to answer, to be honest, because we don't know what's going on really behind the scenes.
No, exactly.
Do we think it makes a big difference, actually, whether someone's actually a coach or a manager? Because when you think about it, we've had the likes in the past of Conte and Sarri as two good examples, who were head coaches, but still had clearly a very significant effect over who was brought in, because who was brought in very closely matched their style of play. You know, there was sort of, you had Conte players and you had Sarri players, even though they were both head coaches. So is it really just a question of semantics? And really, you know, it'll sort of just be a head coach / manager position anyway.
I think it's a good point to make, to be honest. I think that the big difference that it does make is, like you said, for Conte, for Sarri, we gave them what they wanted anyway. But that was almost the club. They asked for something. The club gave that to them. And then you saw also Conte's second season and his second transfer window, and you saw when that stopped happening. And then the question is, would that have stopped happening if he wasn't head coach but actually manager? It's a tough one because, like you say, mostly this is just a different word that describes the same thing, because essentially Chelsea will give him one of those 2 job titles, but neither of those will confirm anything. Like, essentially we will only have confirmation of what exactly he actually is as time goes on with him being at the club, as we find out how much influence or control he has over certain things, I would say. But I think it's a good point to make. I mean, Connor, what do you think about it? Number one, do you think it matters whether someone's a manager, head coach? And what do you think he will end up being?
So I think the important note with that as well is that Tuchel clearly wanted to be a head coach. He didn't want the rest of it, which is part of the fallout that happened. So obviously since Bowley joining, I think they are really after this project manager who wants to be involved in everything, and sort of they want to be a cohesive unit, whereas Tuchel was more so he wanted to do the training around things and really involve everybody in that, but then let the board and directors sort of do the behind the scene things. Obviously he still wanted to say in the transfers and things, but trying to separate the two, and that's sort of where that led astray. Whereas with Potter, I think that's why they liked him. He sort of brung that unity. He was very close with the other board members and things like that. So I think Pochettino will probably be similar to Potter in that sense. I think he'll come in and he'll try to have both like ends of the stick. But at the same time, I do agree with what you say. I think a lot of it comes under the same umbrella, really. I think it's just comes down to the directors and the board's view of what they want from the guy, what they want from their manager. But I think it's very similar.
No, exactly. And I think an important point on that note then is still to make that this whole thorough process and this due diligence and all this kind of work that Chelsea seemingly have made or are doing in terms of deciding who the next manager should be. If you do that much background work and you clear that many things up before actually appointing the guy, if you have the same views on types of what type of players we would like, how we would like to play, if the ownership or the people in charge, whether that's Paul Stanley, Laurenz Stewart, these guys, or the owners themselves and Poch, if they have the same opinion, it doesn't really matter who picks, because if they want to pick the same people anyway, it doesn't, like, as long as you pick if you want the same profiles of players to buy, to sell, whatever, to just have, then it doesn't really matter. Then it's just going to be like they keep going on about a collaborative effort, I suppose. It's a difficult one, I guess. Like I say, in detail, we will only know in hindsight. Let me quickly bring up Poch's previous managerial positions. Obviously, everyone knows about PSG. Everyone knows about Spurs. Most people know about Southampton. He was also in charge of Espanyol before that. I'm not sure exactly what women's football seems as a bit of a very drastic. What is that?
He must have been terrible at that job. He didn't even get a game.
Exactly, 31 days and no games. So I have no idea what exactly this role was supposed to be as an assistant manager, but hey, here it is. But with Espanyol, Southampton and Tottenham, actually let me zoom out a little bit so we can see everything that's on screen. I think that's goals for and goals against. That's points per game. The players used is a little bit less relevant because most of that is down to how long you stayed somewhere. Connor, I'm not sure exactly how much detail you've done your research on clubs outside of PSG and Tottenham, but someone in the chat was like, but he was awful at Espanyol. Now, I'll be perfectly honest. From 2009 to 2012, I have no idea how good or bad Espanyol were, not necessarily because of Poch, but also how good they were before he turned up, right? So, it's difficult for me to judge if this is now embarrassing that he lost a lot more games than he won, or if this is, you are part of one of the relegation fighting teams in Spain, so you're not exactly shocked that you're not going to win more games than you lose type thing.
Yeah, see, that was actually the case. When he took over at Espanyol, it was his first proper job, and he was taking over a team that were really in the relegation scrap at the time. He actually ended up avoiding relegation with them, and it was actually a lot due to him coming in that helped them avoid relegation that year. And he then actually ended up taking them to higher league positions beyond that, and they didn't actually. I don't think they was in a relegation battle again until he left, as far as I believe. So it was actually, as much as the wins, draws, and losses may skew results in one way or the other, I actually don't think that's as bad as it first looks to the eye.
There you go. I think it's an important point to make as well, and important for people to clear up. I think what's also interesting is obviously then got his first. Is Southampton that much bigger than Espanyol? Maybe not, but more taking him out of where he's was already had a standing as a player, because some people might not be aware. Obviously, here you can see he played for a lot of the various clubs in his time as a player. Started for Newell's in, of course, Argentina, and then Espanyol was his first club in Europe. Was in France for a bit as well, at Bordeaux and PSG. So the Southampton job was kind of the first one taking him out of that almost comfort zone, or where people knew him as a player. And he didn't last long there, but not because he wasn't good, but because he was arguably so good that Tottenham took him out of there very quickly. Right, Connor? That was how it happened, essentially, right? What was the most impressive thing about kind of his time at Southampton? I mean, a lot of people know about Sadio Mane. He was there during his time, wasn't he? So what was the best thing about Southampton in that time, or what Poch did there, if you at all know about that?
Yeah, so I'd say it was just the instant identity that he gave Southampton. He sort of his philosophy essentially was, at the time with Southampton and then going into Tottenham, it was, we're going to work harder than you. We're going to cover a lot of ground. A lot of people would refer to it as territorial dominance, basically. So they are going to basically occupy as many areas of the pitch as possible and outrun the opponent. So his Southampton team is one of the highest distance covered teams since that 2013-14. And since then, there's only been one team that surpassed it, I believe. It was 117 kilometres per.
And let me guess, that was Bielsa's Leeds.
No, it wasn't actually. I think it might be Klopp's Liverpool.
Fair enough. That seems about right as well, to be fair. No, go Go on, sorry.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, and that's the main thing that he sort of implemented straight away, and that actually took Southampton to 8th place position, their highest finish since the 2002-2003 season. So a lot of people loved him at the club, of course, because of what he did, and he again brought through some good youth prospects. I believe that was James Ward-Prowse's proper breakthrough season under Pochettino as well, and obviously now he's the Southampton captain, so he's come through and he's really kicked on there. And then a lot of the other players ended up getting big moves, which got Southampton a lot of money generated. You got Lallana, Ricky Lambert, like Mane, of course, like these players that ended up going for high fees and really working out financially for Southampton.
Was Van Dijk there when Pochettino was there?
I don't think so. I might be wrong. But
Just thinking, because that Southampton team, I remember everyone at the time was saying it was getting gutted by Liverpool.
Yeah.
And I think he did pretty well at Southampton despite that, really.
Yeah, I think he stayed a lot longer than the others did, Van Dijk. I think he was like a bit later in terms of, I think, the likes
I'm
of
also not sure
Lallana.
when he joined them from Celtic, if I'm being perfectly honest.
That's the thing. Not sure.
But he would have done it somewhere. When did he join Liverpool? Like 2017?
Something like that.
Yeah.
So something around then. I think something to touch on, get Ollie's and Pice's thoughts on that as well before we take a bit more of a deep dive into Poch at Spurs and PSG. The whole not winning, and also like, is he the right kind? Does he have the right mentality? Some people have stamped him as like a yes man under at Tottenham because he didn't really demand more from Daniel Levy. Like they made a Champions League final and then didn't sign anyone in the window after that and the window before that, right? So like that's kind of insane. At the same time, we did the same thing. I know we bought Lukaku, but that clearly didn't matter. So it's basically we didn't buy anybody. We just wasted 100 mil. So that's one thing. But and I'll ask you guys if you agree with this with me now. But to me, Pochettino has always felt a little bit like a mini Simeone in terms of his character. Now, I'm not saying that he plays football like Simeone, not by any means, but in terms of the character, and that's why I've always found it weird when people have called Poch kind of like weak or yes man, because that was kind of the last vibe I got from him. I'm not saying I knew too much about the behind the scenes going on, things that were going on there in terms of that I have the best judgment on that, but just from what I took from the outside, he never seemed like that to me. So, Ollie, what was your perception or is your perception of Pochettino from that perspective? Because obviously a lot of people talk about the winning, and just want to say unless I've been lied to by people on Twitter, I think he's only won one less trophy in his career thus far than Thomas Tuchel had when he joined us. And the only difference there is that Thomas Tuchel won that one German Cup with Dortmund, and at PSG, they actually won the same amount of trophies. So I know obviously he had maybe a slightly longer career, but I mean, Tuchel won one German Cup with Dortmund. It's much more difficult to win things with Tottenham than it is to win things with Dortmund. So, I don't want to sit here and praise Spurs or praise what Poch did at Spurs too much, but sometimes I feel like if this wasn't Spurs, we would all view this completely differently.
Yeah, you're spot on, actually. That I think the Spurs thing really does cloud the judgment of a lot of people, for good or bad, and I guess we'll find out in the future whether it is for good or bad. But I don't know, when it comes to who he is as a person, I wasn't massively into Southampton or Espanyol, but I did watch his Spurs team, whenever we played them, and watched a little bit of his PSG as well. He seems like maybe when he was first at Spurs, he might have been a little bit more of a yes man per se, but I think there's probably a slight difference in someone who's a yes man or someone who's a bit of a doormat compared to someone who just wants to prefer to have an even keel rather than sort of upsetting the apple cart, because not everything is the most important thing. There's no need to throw your toys out the pram about absolutely everything like some managers do. And some
Especially
people prefer it one way.
Becoming manager to some extent as well. Like
exactly, it's about being humble as well, right? and all of that stuff. So I think maybe probably as his time's gone on, he's gotten a little bit more oomph, and you can sort of see that a little bit in the content of his teams, because he seems like a relatively tough individual. Like, I don't know if any of you guys remember the Spurs team that he constructed. They were a bunch of bastards, we all remember the Battle of the Bridge, I'm sure, and Like those guys.
I would love us to be bosses like that.
Yeah,
I would
like tough
absolutely love it.
shithousery, and that's something we're really missing. So I would say, on balance, I don't think he's necessarily a yes man, and I also don't think it makes him a yes man for wanting to work within Bowley's structure. I think it's just it's just a slightly different managerial style, I think.
Yeah, no, that is fair. Pies. Similar question. How do you see Poch? I think you, I can't remember if this was on a stream or whether we talked about it like in private. But you kind of, maybe yes man is, I think the term yes man has kind of been drastically kind of misinterpreted on a space like Twitter, and not Twitter Spaces. I mean, just Twitter as a thing, because to me, I find it always weird how people don't see a difference between. So to me, being a yes man is if you agree with something, even though you disagree with it. But if you actually agree, then that's just agreeing, not being a yes man. Do you know what I mean? That's just having the same opinion. Otherwise, everyone that agrees, one person is a yes man to the other person. That doesn't make sense to me. So, Pies, to you, when I say he's almost a mini Simeone in terms of character, again, not in terms of football, we'll get to how he plays football in a minute and ask Connor about that. But you think I'm absolutely off the mark by saying that? Or do you somehow see what I'm talking about? I mean, they're both Argentinian, so I guess there is that similarity. But does it stop there, or do you see similarities like I
do? With Pochettino, I've always had the thought that, maybe he could have asked for a bit more from Daniel Levy, but I also understand that it's incredibly hard to do that when you've got an owner that doesn't really want to spend, I guess. So, initially I was like, I can just see him like going along with what Bowley wants to do. He'll kind of just accept it, but I hope he doesn't, to be honest, because I did feel Potter was a bit like that in terms of like Madueke and stuff like that. Like how many of those guys really were his targets? How many of those did he present to the board in terms of Cole McCauley and stuff like that as well? He works closely with him, who's actually still at the club. So I always felt like Graham Potter was not moaning, but he often mentioned the size of the squad, yet kind of allowed all these players to come in as such. But again, it's a difficult one, because if Graham Potter actually said no, don't think this is the best idea, and he was then maybe convinced or just told, okay, we're just gonna we're getting it anyway because we think this will help you, there's not much you can really do. So again, I think it's quite hard to say whether or not Pochettino will be a quote unquote yes man or something at Chelsea without seeing what happens. And again, I think the difficult thing about this is, say it comes out that we just think by a lot of the reports that, Pochettino is accepting pretty much every decision from above. We don't actually know if he is, because we're not there. Like, as you said, you may, like, he may say no or something or disagree, and then like they may like overrule him anyway or something like that. I don't know. I don't really know how it works, but that could be.
It will probably be one way on some topics, and it will be another way on other topics, right? Like, obviously, in an ideal world, the owners would never kind of just fully overrule the manager on anything, because if a manager is a hard no on any topic, it would be stupid for the for how well the club functions to just overrule the manager. That would never make any sense. But that would then be the owners, like that would be a bad thing on the owners, not a bad thing on the manager for me, because like I say, the manager isn't the guy in charge. So
yeah, I mean, I see both points to this, but I'm someone who firmly believes in, building around what the manager wants. And I can see like Luis Enrique, obviously he came in for the meeting, right? He flew over to London, and then he was pretty much out the race a few days later. And there was reports he demanded several things, and I'm thinking, well, that's not a bad thing to demand several things. Like, I don't know why Chelsea, like that's what makes me think like, oh, is this a bit of a yes man scenario where the manager can't make demands? Because if Enrique did and they just cut him from the race, it makes you think a little bit. But yeah,
the thing is about
what the demands are.
It does, but it's also in terms of this conversation about a yes man, I think it actually says more about the sort of the way a manager is viewed, or almost their character, more than it actually says about them as a person or them as a manager. You know, you could say someone like Potter was it wouldn't be silly to say someone like Potter was a yes man necessarily, because he seems like he has quite a soft demeanor. You know, he often takes the blame for stuff, things like that, you know, and he always wanted to make a good relationship work with the owner. It's not a bad thing. Whereas, you know, you can say someone like Jose, for example, is obviously not a yes man, or someone like Conte, you know, falls out with certain people everywhere he goes if things aren't necessarily right. And, you know, just look at his scathing interview he had, press conference he had at Spurs before he went. You know, you can say he's definitely not a yes man, but you never know what's happening behind the scenes that he might actually agree to or what have you. So I think it actually says more about what we publicly see as a manager's character rather than what they're actually like.
I agree with that. And I mean, you mentioned it with Conte there. There's one example where he's so much not a yes man that it becomes a problem for no matter which club he works for. It has become a problem for everyone but Juve. And Juve never seemed to become an issue. I don't know why that is, but anyway, that seems to be the scenario. But just to go back to Pais's point in terms of Luis Enrique's demands, like Pais, let me just give you an example. Imagine Luis Enrique is sat there in those meetings with the ownership, and he's like, well, yeah, I would like to sign Busquets and Jordi Alba, and who else can I think of? Iago Aspas, like all 30-plus-year-old players that the ownership really, they don't want that. Like if those were his demands, obviously, I don't know if those were his demands. I'm just giving you an example where if those were his demands, I find it absolutely right for Chelsea to say, well, no, well, we don't want that, right? Did you get what I'm trying to say? Price, you here?
Oh, is that to me?
Someone's got him. The people at Twitter have finally got you, Pice.
Yeah, no. To be honest, bro, I didn't really listen to what you said.
So basically, I was saying if the demands of Enrique were like, I want to sign Busquets and Jordi Alba and Iago Aspas and some other 30-plus-year-old Spanish players, if that were his demands, well, then it's very understandable that Bowley and the ownership are like, well, no, we don't want that. Do you know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying. Not agreeing to demands doesn't mean we are doing something wrong. It could just be bad demands. Like it could be both, but we don't know.
Yeah, I agree. But like, he did work with a load of young Spanish players as well in the Euros. So like, wouldn't he also know? Like, if you're flying over for a job interview, would you not at least know a brief of like where Chelsea's at right now with the young players? Like, surely you watch football. Like, surely he follows football.
No,
so.
it's true.
But maybe it's just something that's irrelevant. Maybe there's something that's non-negotiable for him that, you know, is a reason why negotiations broke down. It could be image rights, could be something to do with the team, could be anything. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And I guess in terms of, yes, Chelsea have a lot of young players. Maybe that was exactly the reason why he wanted to add a few experienced ones to it, because we already have so many young ones, rather than wanting to add more young ones.
That, though, I'd argue we do need to do that.
I might not disagree with you, but we both know that Bowley ain't doing it. Like, let's be honest. We're not going to sign multiple 30-plus-year-olds. I think we tried that with Aubameyang, and we know where that took us. Do you know what I mean? Connor, I'll take it back to you. Before we get into more like tactical detail, let's take it to Spurs. I don't have the graphic up to show now, but especially his home record, that goes for PSG as well, by the way. But his home record was impressive. And his home record, if I'm not mistaken now, his home record was also partly while Tottenham weren't even in their own stadium. Because a lot of that was actually while they were at Wembley as well, which arguably makes it even more impressive that he would have a good home record. So how do you see his managerial style, rather than just tactics? But do you think it's because I was listening to the London is Blue podcast with Matt Law, and because obviously Matt Law is a correspondent for Chelsea and Tottenham, so he would have a thing to say about Poch, even though he pissed me off because he kept calling Mudryk. And I'm like, why are you saying his name wrong? Like, should we call you Matt Law now? Like, it's just the wrong name. He's not Modric with a U. He's Mudryk. It's a different person, man. Anyway, so he was like, he's less about our tactics and, you know, constantly changing things and this and that. It's more about mentality and work rate. Would you agree with that? Or do you think that's also to some extent doing him a little bit of a disservice from a tactical point of view? Because there's a lot of people that run around saying the Poch isn't tactically very good. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, I don't know. I mean, he took a team to a Champions League final. That tells me he can't be tactically absolutely dreadful. Otherwise, you don't do that, especially not with a team like Tottenham. But do you still think it's more about mentality, work rate, rather than that it is about the crazy tactics?
I think, again, I think it's sort of neither here nor there. I think he's got a tactical side to him. I think he's very much more so about building a tight-knit group that is willing to work for him, and they're very in the know about what they have to do. Each of them know their role. But I don't think, like, to say he's tactically inept, I don't think that's very fair. I think he's definitely got a system that is very prominent throughout his career, which is his like 4-2-3-1 variant, which he sort of moves around. It sort of starts as a 4-2-3-1, but it's very formationally fluid. But yeah, I definitely don't think it's fair to say he's tactically inept. I think he's got tactical side, maybe not the same type of tactician that we've seen with Tuchel in the past and Guardiola at Manchester City, but yeah, I think he's very good at building a group of players that know exactly what they're going to do and exactly what they're going to do in that role, and then that sort of fits into his formationally fluid system.
There you go. No, that is fair. Did you see many differences between what he did at Spurs and what he did at PSG at all, or did he roughly, in the grand scheme of things, do the same thing?
So again, he went with that same 4-2-3-1 system initially, but he had a lot of high ego players at PSG. So obviously, getting them to play the exact roles that he wanted them at Tottenham, it wasn't exactly the same. So it was, the premise of it was very similar, 4-2-3-1, which could go into a sort of a 3-4-3 or even a 4-3-3 at times, with different personnel. But it was these high ego attackers that were it was very much structured at the base, and then these three attackers have the license to roam and interchange and do their thing, really. When you've got players like Neymar, Mbappe, and Messi, there's not many tactics that are in place with their brilliance. Like, it's more so give them the ball in high, like, advantage areas and let them work their magic. But whereas at Tottenham, there was a lot more structure in terms of, in 4-2-3-1, Eriksen would sort of join the midfield, Son would sort of push into a striker role, and he'd sort of use these formational adjustments to find little pockets in the game. Whereas, like I say, at PSG, I think it was a lot more, let's get these three the ball and let's let them play, essentially.
There you go. And lastly, before I just let you say your piece on more tactics, and I'll bring up what you sent me as well. Would you define Poch as a offensive manager, as a defensive manager, as kind of like a mix, I guess, balanced manager? Because I think as a whole, from my perspective of what he did at Spurs, is he overall was certainly trying to be an offensive manager, but as soon as they played bigger and / better teams, they became pretty defensive, more than I would have at the time thought that they should have done, if that makes sense. And I also felt that same way when I watched PSG against the top teams under him in the Champions League, as an example being Barcelona. It just felt to me like they parked the bus and tried to punt it to Mbappe for them to counter. And I'm like, we are obviously a better team in terms of the squad that we have. At the same time, we're also 11th right now, so you could argue we're not. But how do you view him in terms of being offensive, being defensive? Like, because obviously under this new ownership, we seemingly at least want to be an offensive football team, want to be a team that has the ball, that scores goals, that plays attractive football. That was, I think anyway, the idea in getting Potter, having young players, exciting players. But if he is now a bit too defensive, I'm not really sure how that fits into what they've been trying to do in the first year. So that's why I'm asking the question. How do you view him from that point of view, mate?
Yeah, so I think he's both, really. I think he's quite balanced in a sense. I think he wants to have a solidity at the back in terms of the way they set up from the back, but he likes to be offensive. He likes to win the ball back in the opposition third, as we saw by the pressing numbers I was saying about. That was familiar at Tottenham. They were 3 of the 8 top distance covered metrics were his Tottenham teams in 2015, 2016, 2017. So this was something that he wanted to push high up the pitch, win the ball back in the attacking third, and quickly change defense to attack. So I think it's very balanced. But like you said, in certain fixtures against higher opposition sides, like even at PSG in Champions League ties, I think sometimes it can become something in his head where it's like, right, we're going to be very defensively sound, and then we're going to try and hit them on the break. So whether he's learned from that, being at PSG, and he's got this squad at Chelsea, which he can really grow with. Hopefully, he's learned a few things from that. I would say that's somewhere where we need to be careful with him in terms of, will he just go back into a shell against higher oppositions? Because he does like to be offensive against lower opposition teams, and that is usually where he's quite effective. But then it's also key to note at PSG, they struggled a lot against low block teams, which is something we've seen at Chelsea quite a few years in a row now, I'd say. Low block teams really hurt us. So again, there's a few learning points for him. I'd say that hopefully in the few years that he's been out of the Premier League, he's sort of refined, and we could be seeing a leveled up version of Poch. Let's hope for the best. But
well, hopefully that would be the ideal, wouldn't it? I do then want to go into a conversation about who are going to be winners and losers under Poch at Chelsea. But before that, you sent me this in terms of how tactically Poch sets up, in terms of that his most favoured formation for the most part, other than maybe the second season at PSG, because then Messi was added and that kind of ruined the whole thing because they kind of needed to figure something out with this many attacking superstars. Well, it's kind of a mix of 4-2-3-1 that clearly then shifts to a 3-back. And like I say, I was listening to the Matt Law podcast with the London is Blue podcast, and he was saying that that he was very, not reliant is maybe the wrong word, but it was very focused, or it highlighted the strengths of fullbacks, which if that is the case and he's going to do the same, that's a good thing, I would say, because fullbacks, we have our best players. So, that wouldn't be a bad thing, would it? But how would you explain it in a little bit more detail, how he, as at least in the past, sets up tactically?
Yeah, so as you can see, the left, you've got the 4-2-3-1 variant, which is sort of how it looks from the get-go. This is similar. He started with this at Southampton, and again with PSG. It's like the premise of how the team sets up, but it's not quite as plain on the paper as a 4-2-3-1 setup. So as you can see on the right, that's how it sort of looks in possession. You have Bayer, who plays as this halfback, dropping in between the lines, picking up the ball. And you've got 3 very good ball-playing centre-backs, which I can see him using quite well at Chelsea as well. People like Levi Colwill, but we'll speak about that when we get on to winners and losers. But people like that. So he's got 3 very good ball-playing defenders who can really look for those big diags and really get him to the big attacking fullbacks who are going to push really high and most act as overloads for beyond Son and Dele in this system. So then Eriksen is, of course, he was more of a creative hub. He'd sort of come in from that right attacking mid into the middle with Dembele. And then them two, especially Eriksen, would sort of float around, getting in between the lines, picking up the ball and really trying to move the needle for Spurs, really try and get Son, Ali and Kane into these advantageous positions. So as I said, like the territorial dominance is a big feature of this. So Walker and Rose, or the fullbacks in general, would push very high, and then they'd all sort of try and funnel the opposition into that attacking third and win the ball back in the attacking third with high press, high intensity, hard working setup. So that is the long and short of how he likes to set up. And as you pointed out, I think fullbacks are very key. And I think that Eriksen role is very key, and one that I'm still kind of can't put my finger on exactly who's going to fill that role, because I think there's a few different ways he could do it with the Eriksen role, but I think they're the 2 really important things that if he's going to use this at Chelsea, he'd have to really hit the nail on the head. We've got the fullbacks for sure. That's probably one of our strongest assets, I'd say.
That is very interesting, because I'd follow that up with another question. Guys, it seems like Connor's internet is struggling a little bit. I don't know, maybe we'll want to turn the camera off, see if that helps at all, just because you're cutting out a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know if that will help. We're just trying it out. If it doesn't help, we'll just turn the camera back on. Obviously, they started in a 4-2-3-1, and then one of the midfielders kind of fell into a back 3. Now, we currently don't have a player that does that. You could maybe argue that maybe Jorginho would have kind of done that, but you wouldn't really want Jorginho in a back 3, would you? But you most certainly wouldn't want Enzo Fernandez doing this, because then we're just moving him even further and further and further away from where he's actually useful and from the areas that we paid 120 million euros for him to affect. So that would be another stupid thing to do. But Frank Lampard has been doing it for the last, 4 games, so brilliant. But then when you look at the right side, it kind of just looks like what Thomas Tuchel was doing. So do you think, in terms of how he likes to attack, even if the principles are maybe somewhat different in terms of tactically and stuff, do you see similarities to Tuchel at all?
You could say with the 3-back system, it's very similar. He likes to get those fullbacks nice and high and pressure, but And similar with the inside forwards of Son and Ali, he sort of like to use that with Mount and sometimes Werner on that left side. So yeah, there's definitely in attack, I'd say there's some principles that are similar to Tuchel. At times, I think Tuchel liked to go very wide and direct, whereas sometimes Pochettino likes to use these fullbacks almost as overload and forget sort of where they go for the overload, and you try and actually force the ball inside with these Eriksen, Dembele, Son and Ali sort of creating that box midfield four. So Enzo, in this instance, like you mentioned, he wouldn't be the one that you wanted to drop into that halfback position. He'd definitely be that number 8 where Dembele is, sort of being able to create. And this actually could be a way of, when I was saying about Eriksen, one way that Pochettino could do this is almost have Enzo as his Eriksen, but obviously from the central position rather than out on the right, which could then leave somebody like Madueke to fill the right spot, or a different like Havertz who could then go into that Dele Alli role. There's a few different ways that he could do it. But
Kunku, of course, who's to join us still.
Yes, of course. He's another one that I think could easily take the Ali role, or could even take that Eriksen role, getting on the ball, because a lot of
even Mount could possibly do it as well.
Yeah, Mount is definitely one who I think Pochettino really like his intensity as well in terms of pressing and that sort of distance covered metric. I think Mount's somebody, and we've seen with links, certain tweets, I can't think exactly who's been saying it, but a lot of people are saying that Mount is going to be heavily favoured by Poch, and I could see why, for sure.
Absolutely. So unless you wanted to add anything more in terms of how Poch likes to set up tactically, I'd like to talk quickly about who will be the winners and the losers of the current squad. Obviously, we all are aware that Chelsea will try to offload a lot of players this summer. The question is now, will some of these players who are maybe on the cusp of do they leave, do they go, will that have changed now because Poch wants certain players? One example potentially being Mason Mount, and I'll take that to you, Pies. Number one, do you see Mount's situation at the club changing at all with Poch coming in now? And obviously we had some reports over the last couple of days that Todd Bowley actually met with Mason Mount and his people on Friday. So, you know, it was Todd Bowley before the World Cup that was leading those contract negotiations. Then he left it to Paul Stanley and Laurenz Stewart, who seemingly fumbled the ball completely. And now Bowley was like, well, I've had enough of you lot being absolute clowns. I'm doing it myself again, which is an issue because what if they're all three of them are just clowns? Who knows? But now there is talk about that maybe Mount might sign a 1 or 2 year extension, which I personally would actually find quite smart, because if you give him a 1 or 2 year extension, he's probably much more willing to take a lower wage for that. And then you basically tell him, well, okay, so yeah, now you got 1 or 2 more years extra to earn those bigger wages that you actually want. And if that is kind of the idea, you get another 2 years to earn, or let's say 1 other year to earn yourself that. If you don't, you will get sold. If you do, you will get those big wages that you want. Like Connor touched on, it seems like Pochettino will quite favour Mount. So do you see the situation with Mount at all changing? We'll get into his injury news later as we talk about Brentford. But Pies, just to start with Mount, then obviously you can elaborate your other opinions of certain players that you think will thrive and others that maybe potentially lose out under Poch. Pies, did I not make clear enough to you? You're muted. I'm not sure if you're aware. There you are.
Right, yeah. I think the Mount contract situation could change. But what I would say is, in terms of like what you said, in terms of like, oh, we're going to give you like a couple more years, earn your big wages. I feel like Mount already feels like he's earned these big wages, and that's half the problem that the club don't want to give to him. But I also feel like if like Pochettino has like a conversation with him and says like, okay, like you're one of my guaranteed starters next season, then I think Chelsea could be more inclined to actually give him those bigger wages. Because I think the problem is at the moment is, you know, and the problem leading up to this managerial appointment has been, we don't know who the manager is going to be. You know, we don't know whether you're going to be a guaranteed starter. So we can't give you 250 grand or 200 grand because you might be sitting on the bench, and we can't afford to have someone on the bench with those wages. So I think that's been half the issue. But also, like, I do feel a sense of like he will get sold, because if you think about it, in terms of like sellable assets, he's probably the one that we would sell for the most money. I mean, even with Havertz, you know, you're not going to get, I think for Havertz, you know, maybe 40, 50 million pound. With Mount, you can maybe get, you know, 55, 60 million. So those are probably the only two which I would say in terms of raising funds, you could probably sell. So I think we're going to have, like, if we do keep Mount, we're going to have a hard time raising enough money to then spend on the transfers we want, in my opinion.
It's not a bad shout as well, to be fair. I mean, I think Gallagher will bring quite a significant amount of money in, but who else but Gallagher is a good question. If Colwell will stay, if Mount stays, where else does the bigger money come from? It's a fair point. I mean, maybe Pulisic, not to the same extent as Mount, but it's still a good chunk of money. It's a tough one. But Pies, I'll let Ollie give his piece on that in a second. But any other players that you feel like could be big winners or losers? I mean, Josh says here, Joao Felix will be a loser. Do you think Joao Felix is less likely to stay under someone like Poch, especially with the way Connor was talking about pressing being such a major factor in the way Pochettino plays football? That doesn't exactly scream Joao Felix, that does it?
No, I think Felix is going to be an interesting one. Obviously, personally, I really want him to stay. I think we might try for like another loan. I think that would be smart to see, whether maybe like a loan plus option, see whether he fits into our like team. But under Pochettino. But I think the one that I want to mention is Nkunku and also Mudryk. I think you see Son's development. Obviously, Son was a good player in the Bundesliga before he signed, but he just turned into absolutely world class when Pochettino came over those years. So I think I'm really looking forward to see what he can do with Mudryk, and I'm pretty sure he's definitely been in part of like the big talks, the big plan with Pochettino. And also Nkunku, I mentioned, I think his like ability to play behind the striker, create, score goals. I think he's going to be a massive player under Pochettino, which is why I find it so interesting, because like if we do play a 4-2-3-1, I don't see space for Nkunku, Mount and Felix. So and especially Havertz as well. So I think there's got to be some shifting and selling there. Whether or not Felix then goes out to maybe like a like a wide spot, but maybe cuts in a little bit, I don't know. Or Nkunku does that, or even Mount, because he's played there at times under Tuchel. So I think a lot is dependent, again, formation, how we're going to set up. But I can definitely see Nkunku being a big part of Pochettino's plans for sure.
No, exactly. I do agree that this Dele Alli position, the way Connor explained it earlier, to me just screams Nkunku. It just, to me, how I see Nkunku, and I'm no expert on it, mind you, just screams like that would be ideal for him, where you mix kind of being slightly wide at times, central, almost playing a second striker type thing. You have the runner next to you, which for them was Son, for us could be Mudryk. So I agree, Mudryk, Nkunku could most certainly thrive. There's a few others where I'm a lot less sure. Cucurella, don't really. I mean, obviously he was an effective wing back before Potter turned him into a left centre back at Brighton, but we just haven't seen him be any sort of useful in that position. If Pochettino isn't going to use any of the fullbacks to stay a bit deeper, then I see Cucurella even more waste than he already was this season, or maybe even more than this season is quite possible. But not certainly still nowhere near the 60 million that we paid for him. So it's a tough one. Ollie, any particular players?
Sorry. Can I just say on Cucurella, I think it's a bold shout, but I think he could be sold, honestly, because I think with the attacking options, like in terms of like how he likes his fullbacks to attack, I think Ian Martin could be perfect, especially if we play a three at the back. Honestly, his attacking stats for Burnley this season have been outrageous. And I see him more of, he plays left back, but he's attacking like, wow, like honestly, he's so much better than Cucurella. So I think Poch could really like him.
And why not? His wages would certainly be lower. Do you know what I mean? Like, why not use Martin behind Chilwell instead of having two 50+ million left backs competing and then one being good and one being awful? Do you know what I mean?
I think there'll be a sale like that. Maybe two, maybe maybe a Koulibaly, maybe Cucurella. I don't know, but
Sterling could go.
But Cucurella certainly, I think I can just see him really liking Chilwell, obviously for obvious reasons, and then Martin as well. So yeah,
no, exactly. I do agree, absolutely, mate. Ollie, your perspective: winners, losers under Poch from the current squad. Before I get another super chat up, which talks about which potential signings we could need.
I think that the two that stand out to me the most is one is Levi Colwill or someone like Benoit Badiashile, tall, physical centre-back with a very, very good passing range. We know that, sort of Vertonghen and Alderweireld were very important to Poch at Spurs, and, they formed a very formidable partnership. We have Fofana as well. Our defence is very good, but I think someone like Colwill will really, really flourish. under him. The other one is I think Mudryk would be perfect for that Son role. Sort of being really dynamic, arriving in the box, driving at players, using his pace, which we haven't really seen a huge amount of yet while he's been at Chelsea. I think a lot of the time we've been trying to almost give the ball to feet with Mudryk, and I think that there's almost no point, a little bit. He's an okay dribbler, but his real asset is his pace. And so I think, if you play him in behind a little bit like Son, make him sort of like a deadly second striker, that could be really, really dangerous, but not for us.
Yeah, no, exactly that. I would absolutely love it if we could make that happen. Connor, your perspective, winners, losers on the Poch. Obviously, you touched on a couple of players already. Any other ones that stand out? It's maybe more in the loser category as well, because we've had a lot of the winner category already.
Yeah, so just quickly, as I'll just echo the point really quickly so I don't have to go over it. Colwill and Mudryk are definitely two of the standout winners. They will both be very good for Pochettino. I'll put my head on the line when I say that. I think they're both very good for his exact style and brand of football, especially Levi Colwill. I think he's the one to look out for. One other positive I would say is Carney Chukwuemeka. I think he could be liked by Pochettino in the sense that he's a physical ball-carrying midfielder, much like Dembele. Of course, I'm not trying to compare their qualities right now, but I think Carney has a similar profile of physicality and ability to bring the ball forwards as Moussa Dembele did at Tottenham. So he's another one that I think could be a winner. In terms of losers, I think really you're looking at someone like, again, Poch-Era. I think if you can get him out, I think we would, because I do think Maatsen is a better fit for Pochettino, like Pies said. And another loser, I would say,
Felix, in your mind? I mean, obviously, loser is a bit in quotation marks here because he might just not stay. But in a way, that could be loser in a way. Do you think Felix is less likely to stay with Poch?
I think if we can get him on loan, I think he may stay again. I don't think they'll be willing to pay the money to do so because of Pochettino. I don't think he'll know fully if he wants to keep him or not yet. I think you'd have to see him. Sort of, you can't deny Felix's talent, but as you've all spoke about, I think the one key thing is he's not really a pressing player, but he could be utilised in that Eriksen role where he's sort of the free man and he doesn't really have to do a lot of the pressing. He sort of just like floats around, picking up the ball.
I think creative. We probably have better people to fit that role. Really,
yeah.
And who also do press as well. So I think you're right. I think Felix is definitely sort of on the chopping block for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I think Mount and Kunku could definitely fill that role, and then we don't have to spend 70 odd million on a role that we essentially already have, really. But I think he's a really talented footballer, Felix, and I think he's very good.
That's what I think as well. Like, don't you think like it's okay having Mount and Kunku? Don't you think Poch will want someone that has that little bit of like, flair, that little bit of can get away from someone, that type of that type of flair player? Because I don't see Mudryk as that. I don't think Madueke is that. I don't think Mount and Kunku are that as such. Maybe in Kunku a little bit, but not as much as Felix.
That would tell me that Felix, if you're drawing the comparisons though, that Felix is almost more like a Lamella than an Eriksen. He's got that kind of that flair to him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a really difficult one for me because there is a way in which you can fit Nkunku and Felix in a team, but not the way Poch has played so far in his career. Now he might do things differently to make it work, very possible. But if he does things the way he's done before, just look at each side of those two of what we have on screen now. Where would you have Nkunku and Felix in this? You just wouldn't. So it can only be one of the two. And one we already have signed, the other one we haven't. So to me, it just wouldn't make sense to then have two 60, 70, 80 million players who have to compete for the same position.
Not to mention, we've got to, we've got to buy a whole spine this summer, really. You need a keeper, need a centre mid, need a striker. So it's just not, I don't think the owners should prioritise buying Felix. I think if we've got money left over from selling a bunch of players. We didn't mention it, but Chalobah might be another one that I think might struggle under to get any game time under Pochettino. Could see him leaving as well because he represents pure profit on the books. So I think in terms of just priorities, I think Felix probably they won't be looking to buy him permanently, in my view at least.
Yeah, no, I think if he stays, it's going to be on another loan. I agree with that. Pice just put in a private chat here. What do we think about Silva? Well, he's going to turn 40, innit? He will play probably the most important games, but the others, I assume he will get less and less regular game time. Unless Poch does play it back three regularly, then he will get.
I hope he gets to play like a mentoring role to our young centre backs
Yeah.
for another year. You know, like it would be so good to have Colwill, Badiashile, Chalobah, and Fofana all learning under him, and whoever else turns up as well. I think it'd be great to have him for just one last year, for him to basically teach them everything he knows, and then he can swan off back to Brazil.
Exactly, or wherever else he fancies going. I mean, see, we had a super chat here by Gear who says, "What does Pochettino need in the summer window?" And the reason why I then brought this tweet behind it up now is because we are probably all in agreement that we need a striker. The thing is, we have a £100 million striker who we don't want. Not really, anyway. Certainly as a fan base, let's say. The club will get to this tweet in a second. But also a player that doesn't want to be with us, reportedly at least, and what we've heard and seen from him over the last 18 months. But yeah, Matt Law has reported that Chelsea will ask Romelu Lukaku whether or not he wants to revive his Chelsea career under Mauricio Pochettino, as the club have not ruled out the possibility of a return. Pice, I'll let you go first on this. Thoughts? Number one, because my big issue is I don't want Lukaku to still be here. I don't think Lukaku wants to still be here. But two issues with that. Number one, I don't think anyone will want to buy him. Apparently, not even Inter want him on another loan, which would be bad. But even still, we need another striker. And all of the strikers we would be interested in are going to cost us 100 million upwards. But also, we're not in Europe. So as much as we have this whole project behind us, we're still going to be competing against teams that are in Europe. So I don't also think that there is necessarily a guarantee that we will just get to all of these players, that whether that's an Osimhen or whether that's a Kolomouani or whichever other strikers we might potentially get linked with as the summer window comes closer. So I don't want Lukaku here, but I still wouldn't be shocked if he ends up here next season anyway. Just because, and it's just such a big problem that if you signed a player for 100 million less than 2 years ago, you can't sell him for even half of that now. So where do you stand on this? Like, Pice, would you be fuming? Would you be totally against it if he did come again, or if he did return, or what would be your perspective?
I've hated watching Chelsea's attackers so much this season that I don't think Lukaku would be any worse, to be honest with you. But I don't want him back. I don't want him back for sure. Let me just make that clear. I'd much rather prefer if he stayed at Inter Milan, just because you can never trust his character as well. Like, you don't know what, like, I don't know, there's so many stories, like, apparently he just acted like a prick on the training ground and stuff like that, like, let me show you how to score, that type of thing. Like, especially when we've got a lot of young players, I don't want him, like, changing the character of these players or like, I don't know. I don't want any issues, basically. So,
kind of gives them tutorial how to do bad interviews. Do you know what I mean? Like, we can't have that.
I mean, yeah, so I'd rather not, rather not bring the troublemaker back. But, look, let's hope from our end he keeps up his form, because last game he got 2 goals and 1 assist. So, maybe Inter Milan will buy him and will go on loan again. But for me personally, I don't see a way in hell he's going to want to come back, to be honest with you. Like, I just don't see it. But then again, Lukaku...
Pochettino is a master of the personal relations. If he
I was going to say, like, Lukaku thinks he's always in a movie during his career, so I wouldn't be surprised if he just gets this, like, supernatural, like, I'm coming back, here I am again type thing. But I think again, he just doesn't really suit the way Pochettino plays over.
No, he can't press to save his life. So
exactly, like, it's with Lukaku, you have to build the team around him. Like, I was watching the comp of the game where he scored 2 goals in. It's literally just reminiscent of Lukaku. Like, you have to build up around him, you have to build up to him. It was a lot of like little layoffs and stuff, and I think you could see certain games where you're like, oh yeah, this will 100% work with the attackers we've got around him. But I just think he's too much of a like a one, like, not one-dimensional as such, but like there is just a certain way you have to use him. And I'm not saying it couldn't work again, but I don't know. I think maybe teams have a better place to put in game plans to stop him nowadays as compared to a few years ago, maybe.
Absolutely. Connor, your thoughts on Lukaku potentially coming back, both from a just you being a Chelsea fan perspective, but also from a kind of, I guess, a tactical point of view as well. Like, because Poch has thrived the most when he had, well, Harry Kane. And it's like I say, I'm just, are we really going to get Osimhen? Are we really going to get Kolomwani? I still don't think we're going to sign Ivan Toney unless we find out that his ban isn't going to be that long. But until his ban is confirmed for how long it's going to be for the betting stuff, I don't think anyone's going to touch it, if I'm honest, because you'd be crazy. What if he gets banned for 18 months, even more? You don't want to sign that before you know how long it's going to be banned for. But if it's not Osimhen and Kolomwani, who the flip else do you go for? Then you're already talking almost, unless I'm forgetting some clear striker that I should be considering right now, but then you're talking already a step below. And so I really dislike Lukaku. And if people have watched these streams enough, I'm really not a fan. But it's a bit like with Pochettino. If I take my hating Spurs glasses off, if I take my hating Lukaku glasses off, I would understand from a club's perspective if they wanted to try it again. Simply because they have a £100 million player who has zero resale value currently, and we need another striker. So I would understand if they would maybe like to try again. And then if it doesn't work, we can, maybe he's, raised his value a little bit and we can sell him the summer after and then sign to someone else when we are in Europe again, whether that's Champions League or a different European competition, would still make it easier to buy a different top striker. So, Connor, what's your perspective on the look back thing? Do you know what I mean? The run back.
Yeah, so both as a fan and analysing it, I think in both ways, I don't think there's a way it can go right if he comes back and plays. Personally, I think I was really excited when he rejoined. I was like really on that train of like, I think he's going to come, he's going to smash it for us. It's a feel-good story, but it just, obviously the turmoil it caused, and we're in such a transitional phase where if we're getting Pochettino, we're already talking about an ex-Spurs manager joining, who a lot of half the fan base probably don't actually want. A lot of them would have had favourites elsewhere. Adding Lukaku turmoil on top of that, I think that's just a recipe for disaster. I think one way that you could look at this Lukaku is that apparently Atletico Madrid have registered some sort of interest. So the only
bring Morata back.
Yeah.
Not again.
Don't want to go through that again. Still relive that miss.
Somehow he's Spain captain nowadays. God knows how that's happened.
But I think that one way maybe is if we could sell him to Atletico and have it some sort of thing where we can bring Felix back on a loan. We sell him there, or they both do a loan swap. Like we give them on loan, we get Felix on loan for another year, and then it can allow
almost be a free loan.
Exactly, and then almost give Pochettino a chance to look at Felix in his own eyes and see how he could utilize him. I think that's one option. Like you say, I think that the thing is we will need a striker. That's very much well known as a Chelsea across the Chelsea fan base. Yeah. Toney is the one for me that I highlight. I think he fits Pochettino best. I think his ability to sort of rotate. He's not just a standstill operate striker. I think I'd like Osimhen, but the money that's going to be on the table for him is going to be ridiculous. I think we could struggle with Osimhen. And then the other options, like you said, they're not as easy to get. I mean, the other two that you didn't mention are maybe Ramos from Benfica, possible. Yeah. But again, I think dealing with Benfica again, that would be a lot of money.
Again, it's a step below, though, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, of course. And he's relatively unproven. So, again, we'd be sort of dipping a lot of money in the dark at what could be.
Exactly.
And again, Jonathan David, another one. But again, step below. And
he just wants to counter, no? At least that's what your expert always told me, that Jonathan David is best at counter-attacking. And we don't do that. So,
yeah.
It's gone.
Yeah, I do agree. I think that Toney's the one that I'd highlight, Toney and Osimhen, but I think Osimhen's very hard to get, and I think Toney, like you said, I think you sort of need to know his situation before you make a move for him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess our only hope for Osimhen is that he apparently wants a Premier League move, and if United go for Kane, and well, no one wants to go to Spurs. Arsenal kind of already have their players. City have their players. Maybe there's a chance just because we can outpay Bayern.
Drogba,
I mean, Osimhen. Yeah, I was going to say Osimhen loves Drogba. You know
exactly. Well, so did Lukaku. So maybe that's a bad omen. But no, I agree. Ollie, your thoughts on the Lukaku thing?
Yeah, I'm not really like averse to the idea of him coming back for like a bit of preseason, but I'm under no illusions. I don't think he'd do very well. I don't think he's very popular. I don't think he wants to be at Chelsea. So I think it kind of works for all parties to find a solution that works for everyone. You know, Lukaku, if Inter don't want him, you know, like you said, we were talking about Atletico. There's also a couple options. I think, you know, Saudi Arabia, they've got a lot of money in their football league. Turkey as well. There are
But
options
would
for
he
him to
want to
go out.
there is an issue, right? He's not
I
even
don't know.
30.
You know, it's a difficult one. You know, Ronaldo went to Saudi Arabia.
But he's 36, not 29. Or is Lukaku
Yeah,
30 by now? He might be, but
I hear you, but at the same time, you know, like maybe it's his chance to go and be the main man somewhere again.
yeah,
You know,
no, it's true.
to a certain degray.
I mean, if he's down for it, that's probably our best chance of getting good money for him. So
Yeah, you know, and I'm not really sure why. I know he's been terrible recently, and he had a good game against Empoli the other day, but it was
it's
just
also
against.
Empoli.
Yeah, it was just Empoli, wasn't it? You know, it's like someone hyping up Harry Kane for playing well against Bournemouth. You know, it's like, yeah, he did well, but you would expect that, and so I don't know. I think for me, the other good thing about the Lukaku transfer is that obviously it was the old business, the old regime's business. So you know, to a certain degree, I think we're able a little bit to cut our losses on it because Bowley and Co didn't pay for them, but didn't pay for Lukaku. So you know, maybe they'll be happy to take a bit more of a loss. I think, you know, they'll struggle a little bit more if they do want to offset some of the players that we bought in the summer window. You know, Cucurella, Sterling, Koulibaly, etc.
My concern is his wages, you know, because
Mm.
even if we are willing to let him go for a cut price to God knows where, if the only reason we made the Inter thing work is because we still paid, I think, half of his wages, maybe even more than half of his wages. So he was still on his 325 or 350k a week that he was on with us. If we were to permanently sell him, which club is going to pay him that? Except the options that you mentioned, in terms of Saudi Arabia, maybe somewhere in Turkey if they go crazy. But like I say, that requires him to say yes, because he's still contracted to us. So if he doesn't want to go there, he is kind of the one making that decision. If he just wants to make 325k a week rather than play, well, then he can unfortunately do that, I guess.
For sure, but he wants to play, right? You know, like most professional players do. You know, like they're really. It's more than about them than the money, because the money is, you know, ridiculous, and it's more than most of us will ever earn in our lifetimes anyway.
Yeah.
You know, so it's the money past a certain point when you're an elite player isn't always the most important thing. It's, you know, it's actually getting to set yourself out there and show what you can do. And you know, I think Lukaku has a bit of main character syndrome. I don't think anyone would disagree about that. So you know, if he wants to be the main man, he's got to play.
Very true. It's a good point. Just to quickly finish the super chat off, I guess I'll stick with you, Ollie. Any position-wise, player-wise, that you're like, we should go for that in the summer?
I would really like a midfielder or two. You know, just because you can probably one of Mount or Gallagher will get sold. Kovacic might go. You know, we've already lost Jorginho this season, so you know, a properly holding midfielder would be really important. A striker, like we were discussing, is important too. And for me as well, new goalkeeper. I really think we need either a world-class stopgap goalkeeper. I don't know whether like Manuel Neuer is available after being upset at, you know, at Bayern, you know, could do for a stopgap for a year or two. I know there's Mike Maignan as well. There's lots of good, you know, there's a few good options out there for goalkeepers as well, because I don't think we can realistically rely on Kepa and Mendy, at least not going into next season. I think there needs to be a change at number one spot.
I do agree. I'm just concerned about the players that we're actually linked with to replace them. I don't think them are any better than Kepa or Mendy.
No, I don't like David Raya, for example. I don't really think he's much better than Kepa, to be honest. I think it's kind of a lateral move. I think if you need someone, if you're going to get a goalie, you need someone who's going to inspire a lot of faith in the defense. You know, who's going to, you know, make the players feel a bit more solid. You know, and someone like Neuer may well do that. You know, or someone like Maignan playing at the elite level. Even someone like Keylor Navas, who's currently, you know, languishing a little bit at Forest, you know, on loan. So
how old is he nowadays? I have no idea.
I think he's in his 30s, I think. But you know, not a bad option as a stopgap until maybe if we find that the keeper market's already a bit dry.
I guess so is Neuer. So
yeah, so if the keeper market's a bit dry, we can, you know, get a stopgap for a couple seasons while someone's, you know, because goalkeepers' longevity, they can play well into their mid to late 30s, you know, while they're still at the top of their game.
Yeah, no, that is true. Connor, from your perspective, in terms of positions, where do you think we most need to strengthen in the summer, just quickly?
Yeah, so exactly the same three. I think the DM, the striker, and the goalkeeper. Goalkeeper, less important in my eyes, as I do agree that Kepa isn't at the level, but I think the DM and the striker are a bit more important, because I do think if you can get a goalkeeper like Mike Mainan, brilliant. But I think Slanina is one of those players that could have like that Courtois-esque sort of rise in terms of he has to have a few loans, and then maybe we could see something where he's good enough to play for Chelsea. I've seen a lot about him, and I do quite rate him. So my Nan as the goalkeeper option, if possible. If not, maybe we can get through another year with Kepa. His shot stopping at times has been better this year, but I mean, it's more so the fact that his long shots, it almost drives teams to take them, which is what worries us. But the DM and striker are the two important ones. For me, I think Lavia, Rice, or Agate, one of those three for me are very important this summer. I'd like
Over
Lavia.
Caicedo, or is that because you don't see him as an out-and-out DM?
Caicedo is another one, but I think for the fit that we'd have, I think those three that I named, Lavia, Rice, and Agate, are just above him. I'd take Caicedo every day of the week. I think he's brilliant. But I think those three for me are they would be my focus. And then, as we said, striker, I think Tony, Osimhen, one of those if we can. So
of course. Yeah, like you say though, the only problem with Tony is the ban, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. That would be, we sort of have to wait on that one. But I think a striker will need to be addressed in one way or another, whether that is paying a lot for Osimhen, whether that's taking a risk with Tony, or just waiting for what has to happen. Or
just start Broja every game next season. He's good at pressing.
Yeah, I do actually think Broja could be another one of those winners under Poch in the long run. But I don't think next year, I think with his injury and stuff, I think next year might come too soon. But I think in the long run, he might actually quite like Broja.
I'd be willing to give Broja a shot up top next season. I couldn't do any worse than what we've got this season.
No, exactly. It's not much.
So would I. And I feel like the games that he did get, a lot of people are like, oh, he's never held the ball up. I'm like, yeah, but he got the games with Mount and Gallagher in the front three. You know what I mean? Like, what the flip is he supposed to do?
Scored a brilliant goal. Exactly. Minute as well,
I would be a big fan of signing Mignon, purely because I can say my nan would have saved that. Do you know what I mean? just for that reason, I would absolutely love it if we would have Mignon in goal. That would be brilliant. Pies, just quickly, I know anyway that you are in agreement with what the boys have said, but just, voice it, I guess, so everybody that's watching knows as well.
In terms of the goalie?
Well, just in general, which players you think we need the most, or in which positions you think we need to strengthen?
Pretty straightforward, to be honest. I think DM, someone like Lavia, Caicedo. I mean, I watched the other day against Man United. He's so good, bro.
Even against us, man, he destroyed us, bro.
And Lavia had a really good game the other day against Arsenal as well.
Yeah,
blessed for options.
Lavia, Caicedo, Rice, any one of those three, and then striker. I mean, Tony, Osimhen would be my first two. Tony especially. I was doing some research for our match preview of Brentford, and I didn't realise he scored 19 Premier League goals this season. That is outrageous.
For Brentford, you know what I mean? 19
goals for Brentford in the league. That is absolutely ridiculous, bro. He's third in the goal.
He would come to us and score 5. Let's be honest.
I can't. I was shocked. I thought he scored about 13 or 14. I saw 19. I was literally mind blown.
Do you know what it is? Haaland has blown everyone out of the water so much that people aren't noticing. Like Kane's got over 20 and Tony and stuff because they're not at the top of the table. It's crazy.
I think Kane's got 23, and then it's Tony 19, Salah 16. So, but yeah, that's just unbelievably impressive for a team like Brentford. Up top for them is just unbelievable, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. All right, we took way longer talking about Poch and everything surrounding that than I had planned, but hey, here we are. Let's quickly get through a few of the news that we need to discuss as well. First and foremost, injury news. Both Reece James and Mason Mount will be out until the end of the season. Mason Mount has already undergone minor surgery on his pelvic muscle, which was the pelvic injury that he's been carrying for a few weeks, if not months already. Now, Reece James, Lampard in the press conference said he picked up a hamstring injury against Madrid, but managed to finish the game. He might have said that way, but I think he just aggravated an injury that was never healed, because he literally pulled out of England due to injury. I mean, they were talking about the knee at the time, but I think the whole knee is affecting the hamstring. Like, it's all affecting each other, in my opinion. So I mean, I was talking about this on Twitter today because so many people I see screaming, he needs to have surgery. I'm like, well, I agree. If doctors think a surgery will help him, he should have surgery right now. But if doctors say there's no need for surgery, well, then he shouldn't have surgery. Then he should just rest, actually get fully fit again. I don't want to see him after half an hour not being able to sprint anymore and letting Fofana leg it up the pitch from right centre back. Don't need to see that anymore. So next time I want to see the guy, I see the guy play, I want him to be fully fit and I want him to be fully healthy because there's nothing to play for anyway. So how often do players of this level get 2 months, 3 months, 4 months until preseason starts? Where it's not that important, where they can actually rest. Now, obviously, maybe that will make him a little bit rusty when he comes back, but so be it. It's much better that he's a bit rusty than that he's constantly injured. That's how I see that. And Mason Mount might be back for the last game of the season, Lampard said, but nobody knows type thing because he's supposedly going to be out for 3 to 4 weeks after this injury and then obviously train back to fitness. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. Ollie, you replied to my tweet about it on Twitter earlier in terms of that. For you, this was like, well, then surely we're not selling Mount. Do you still stand by that? Like I say, to me, that it could mean both. It could mean we get him healthy so we can sell him for more money, or we get him surgery because we want him to be healthy for us. And I just don't know which one it is.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to know. I do stand by that. It seems more likely that if we're more committed to him, having surgery and getting fully fit, that we're more likely to want to keep him. I think when you look at that in conjunction with the Pochettino news, in line with Bowley and Mount having conversations about his future and potential, bridging on contract situation, it all might be kind of coalescing to the same thing. That's kind of, I was sort of taking the context from several things and piecing it together. But it's still, you could be right. It could be that we're just trying to make sure he's 100% fit. So when we sell him, we get the absolute best out of him and he passes his medical. You don't know. But it's a funny one with Mount and James. I think they both definitely need an extended period on the sideline. James clearly needs to get his hamstrings right. Mount as well. Him being out of the limelight for a little while isn't necessarily a bad thing either, considering, both of those players played almost every game for us in the last season or two. You got the World Cup as well that they both went to, even though, I don't think James didn't go to the World Cup, did he? But, so over the last couple of seasons, they've had a lot of football to play, and it would be good for both of them to have a little bit of a reprieve. And if we do hold on to them, I think we might see different versions of both of them next season.
Hopefully. Pies, your thoughts? Thoughts. It's obviously the fact with Reece, again, everyone keeps going on about the have surgery. I'm no doctor, and even if I was a doctor, I'm not the doctor looking at him. So, none of us are best placed to judge whether he should or should not have surgery. But what we all agree on, get him healthy, get him fit. That's what we all want. I mean, Felix here in the comments, and I'm not sure where you have found this information from, but you might be right. He says Mount's surgery, in quotation marks, was like a PRP injection, regenerative medicine, for his muscle tendon rather than an actual surgery, which is why recovery is very short, which makes sense because if you have, Frank called it a minor surgery. We have to say that, but still, let me get the tweet from Simon Johnson up, who explained it in a little bit more detail. Has undergone a minor surgery today and will be out of action for 3 to 4 weeks. He's yet to agree terms of new deal. We knew that. But if Felix is right, fair play. But guys, much of a thought on the whole Reece James man situation? We should also say Kai Havertz is also out for tomorrow's game with the small knee issue that kept him out of the Brighton game already. He then played through it against Madrid, but he should be back for the game after this. Quickly on Mount and James, please.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one on Reece James. I do agree with you. It's like, the doctors were the ones that advised that, Mount undergoes a surgery. So, or a minor surgery. It wasn't like a major surgery, but still missing a few weeks. And I think Reece James, we can't really comment on it. With the amount of injuries he's had and the way he's been playing in terms of like fitness and doesn't look the same person, same player. I think you can argue, that's probably why people are saying, surgery now, especially because Kante had surgery and, he's actually not been injured yet, which is quite nice. People are just assuming that surgery fixes everything, but I think it could help. But again, we're not doctors.
We don't even know if they have the exact same injury, right? So
exactly, we don't even know. Obviously, Lampard said it's a hamstring for Reece James. Obviously, Kante's surgery was on his hamstring, so maybe he does have surgery. But I think it's we're not the best.
If he does, he should have it ASAP. by the way. Like, what is the
Yeah.
point in waiting now?
Yeah,
Like,
I just personally hope that Reece James is not like putting it off.
I think with the season basically dead, there's no reason for anyone who needs so like Kovacic is kind of the same as well. Like he needed surgery. Apparently, he was going to get it after the
Before
World
the
Cup
World
and
Cup,
and he just never
He
did
looked
it.
terrible lately as well. So
So maybe he could go for it as well. Basically, anyone who's not fit, just stay out of the team.
They
if you
all
need
need
surgery, get surgery right
There's
now.
no need now.
The only thing we've got to mention is Kante was out for a long time after surgery. So after that hamstring surgery. So if Reece did get surgery now, he wouldn't actually be fit for pre-season.
But we do have Gusto coming in, so it's not.
No,
it's
of
not
course.
like we're left without.
For the team, it's
Yeah,
okay.
but
But for
Kante's
him, his prime fitness for
is-
next season, missing pre-season also wouldn't be ideal.
No,
Reece
that's true.
James one though might not be serious as Kante's because Kante proper tore it, didn't he? I think
Exactly.
he tore his hamstring, which is
I think
I
on the
still think
basis
with
that basis that James could finish the game against Real Madrid, I imagine it's probably not as serious.
Exactly that. And I also still think, I know Pice just said he's been injured so often. I still, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe that's just my naivety or just assuming wrong, but I always feel like Reece hasn't had multiple injuries. Reece has always had the same injury that we never gave him enough time to heal properly. Well, not the one that he picked up in Milan. Obviously, that one was a different knee injury. But every time he was injured for a little bit since then, I feel like has always been the same muscle injury that never healed properly. I think. But yeah, Felix has, followed up by saying he's a physio that just worked with a few athletes with similar injuries and from what he can assume safely. So yeah, fair enough. Thank you for your input, Felix. Appreciate it very much. Connor, there's not much more to add, but just quickly on Mount and James, do you see it as, well, in particular in Reece's case, if we still had something to play for, would he still be featuring? And the only reason he's now out for the rest of the season is because the season is done? Or do you think that the injury is all of a sudden super bad and that's why it's screwed?
No, I think exactly what you just said. I think now that the season's over, I think it's prime time to basically shut him down for the year, allow him to recover, go with the doctor's advice, like you said, whether he needs the surgery or not. Just either way, it's smart to just shut him down at this point, let him recover, and then we go from pre-season. He's too good of a player to risk at this point. He's one of those big talents where if injuries hamper him, it's going to, we're talking about a world-class talent in Reece James, but it's whether he can get over those injury problems. So yeah, I'd definitely shut him down for the year, go with what the doctors say. Hopefully he gets that surgery that he needs and then he's ready for next year. And like Ollie said, we've got Gusto, so it's not as important. That it's good that we've sort of got that backup in now rather than having Azpilicueta who's sort of fading out at the minute. So yeah.
Couldn't agree more. And let's finally, to finish this stream off, get into the team. Well, honestly, I'll say that we would like to see tomorrow because I think trying to predict what Frank is going to do tomorrow is nearly impossible.
Could be anything, couldn't it? Could be any formation, could have any
literally.
personnel. We don't know if he's planning on bringing in all the youngsters or what.
He might play himself in centre mid. You never know.
I mean,
he'd do a job, I think.
It's absolutely a difficult one. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, I haven't told you at all today, which is really my bad. But please subscribe if you haven't already. I would massively appreciate it. And hit that like button. Every like helps. So helps you spread these streams out to more people. So please do hit that like button. The YouTube algorithm requires that, please. So that would be great. Boys, I'll start with you, Pice. What formation would you like to see tomorrow, especially knowing that Reece James is out, and therefore, if we want to play a right back, it's either Chalobah, Fofana, or Aspie?
3-4-3 for me personally.
Okay. I'll just do formation first, and then we'll get through the rest. Connor, which formation would you like to see tomorrow?
I'd actually go on the 4-2-3-1 side, mainly because if Poch is coming in and we've basically got to the point where we know that, I'd like to see sort of that integrated as quickly as possible, even if it isn't the exact way we're going to play, just the positional. So I'd say 4-2-3-1. But
that's a good point. So would you just play Aspie there, or because that's my reason? I would agree with you if we had an actual proper right back available.
Yeah, I'd play Chalobah there personally, but I do also think Chalobah could leave next year, so it's more of a stopgap for that position. Yeah. But if I had to pick, I'd play Chalobah.
Fair. And Ollie, what formation would you like to see?
Yeah, 3-4-3, just on the basis of personnel. I don't really think we actually have a right back or a left back who would be like a pure right back and left back who would be good enough to start the game.
Yeah, no, there you go. Unfortunately, Connor, you have now been outvoted, and we will have the 3-4-3 on screen. So now
Sorry,
I will
Connor.
have to ask
more than happy.
how you would feel the team in this formation. But people haven't remembered that Connor would have liked to see a 4-back. So if we are awful tomorrow, then, well, you can say Connor was right. But yeah, 3-4-3, it shall be then. I'd probably be in agreement, like I say. So therefore, we shall go with this. Ollie, you've said it a few times on your Twitter. You would like to see Mendy being given a chance. The problem that we still always have is that no one flipping knows whether the guy's actually fit or not, because he made the bench. And then Lampard, even though he was on a bench, told us he's not actually fit. So now I have no idea if the guy is fit or not. But who would you like to see in goal? Would you put Mendy in, or are you like just play Kepa because it doesn't matter?
I mean, it doesn't matter, but, I don't know. I'd like to see Mendy, if it's to sell him, at least to put him in the shop window, or at least to ask the question about which goalkeeper we should be selling if we were only going to sell one this summer. I think he deserves a chance. I think Kepa has had a lot of chances, and he gets continuous chances and still makes a lot of mistakes, but despite having a good season for us personally himself. I think Mendy, despite being very poor after the AFCON, he was dropped, and we just haven't seen him since. He was kind of dropped at the first sign of trouble, really. So
he came back for a little bit, didn't he? Just before the World Cup, and Kepa was injured for a couple of games.
Yeah, but only for a couple of games. He was very clearly number 2 already, firmly at that point. I think personally, I would like to see him get a bit more of a run in the team, if nothing else, just to give Kepa a bit of a break as well. I don't know, something different.
Yeah, fair dues. Connor, what about you? Would you agree with Ollie? Would you like to give Mendy a chance again, see how he's doing nowadays? Because we always sit here and say, in this stream, especially, how often I sit here and someone in the chat is trying to tell me Mendy would have saved that. I'm like, well, no, he wouldn't have. Yeah, maybe Mendy 2 years ago, but that's not Mendy now. But I say that we haven't seen Mendy play since flipping October, so I have no idea how good or bad Mendy is right now. The only thing I have to go by is that one training video I saw where completely flapped at his ear shot. I'm like, well, but that is obviously one clip from training, so that doesn't mean anything. So for you, Connor, Mendy or Kepa?
Yeah, so I'd also like to see Mendy. I think it does him favours. If we are looking to sell him, all it does is gives him a chance to put himself in the shop window elsewhere. And I do actually think he'll start Kepa, but I would pick Mendy just for that reason. I think good chance to put him in the shop window, and let's see how he's doing after that injury.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think if we did predict the 11, we'd probably all agree that it will be Kepa. Again, we don't even know if Mendy is fit. But, Pies, would you, just assuming that Mendy is fit, again, we don't know. We're just doing this for a laugh anyway, aren't we? Just to a bit of entertainment. Would you, if he was fit, give Mendy a chance, or would you stick with Kepa?
Yeah, why not? I'd bring Mendy back in for a game. Sure.
Yeah. People know I like Kepa more than most. Not that I necessarily rate him more than most, but I like him more than most. But even the season is so dead, I might as well see what Mendy's like nowadays. I mean, like, what difference does it make? So,
I think if I see another 30-yarder going against us, I'm gonna scream. That's part of it, really.
If we concede a 30-yarder and Mendy's in goal, though, then what?
Then I'm gonna scream anyway.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, and then in that case, fair enough.
Yeah, no, there you go. From then on, you might as well put Kepa back in goal, because apparently Mendy doesn't stop them either. Back 3 then. I'll let you start, Pies. Let's get through this and not take too long. So let's do the whole back 3 in a go. Who would you pick?
My back 3 would be Badiashile on the left. I would pick Silva in the middle, and then Fofana on the right for me personally.
Connor, would you agree with that back 3, or would you maybe leave out Silva just because season's done? Why play a 38-year-old or 39, whatever he is?
You could say that with Silva. I think you could easily leave him out, but I've actually got down the exact same back 3. In a back 3 formation, I'd play that exact same 3.
Fair. And Ollie, would you agree with the same back 3 as well?
Yeah, I go exactly the same. I think Silva adds a little bit of that, just organisation and experience to the back line. Can't hurt.
Exactly. No, I would just agree. If I'm honest, I would pick the exact same back 3. Wing backs, it shall be then. No Reece James, but Ben Chilwell. So I do reverse order. I guess I'll say mine first. And I would say Chilwell and Loftus-Cheek. I don't think we should be playing Aspie at right wing back. And if Reece isn't available, Ruben has done enough at right wing back for me to trust him in doing a reasonable job there. So I would pick him, and that would be my 2 wing backs. Ollie, would you agree with those 2 wing backs, or would you play someone else in particular instead of Ruben? I would assume. I think Chilwell is pretty set in stone, isn't it?
Yeah, spot on for me. I don't see anyone else being able to play that right wing back spot unless you're going to shoehorn a winger in there, and Loftus-Cheek does a passable job.
Fairs. Connor, in agreement of that too?
Yeah, exactly the same. Very boring, but exactly the same.
Hey, call it boring, but just great minds think alike. I mean, can't complain. Pies, same wing backs?
Yeah, probably. The reason why I went for a back 3 as well is mainly because of Rico Henry at left back. I think he's one of their main threats and want more cover on that side. So, yeah.
Yeah, between Fofana and Loftus-Cheek should be enough, I think.
Yeah, there you go. And if it's not, would we be shocked if we lose again? Not really. So, we got
all we got to
now,
lose at this point.
Hey, I'll be over the moon if we get a point tomorrow, chat. I mean, we'll get to the score prediction at the very, very end. Connor, I'll let you go first. 2 central midfielders. Who would you pick there?
So I would go for Enzo and Carney Chukwuemeka, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's Enzo and Gallagher. But I would go Carney.
Huh. Fair enough. No, all right. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I still never really see Chukwuemeka as a pivot player. Like, as far as, obviously, I didn't watch him at Villa, but I learned that he played as an attacking 8 or 10 there. Now, we've used him, if in the 3-4-3, we've used him more in these 2 positions than back here. So I don't know if the managers agree that he can play that or not, but might as well try it for all I care. So, fair enough. Pies, you've been one of the guys that have mentioned Chukwuemeka as a potential pivot option many a time. So, would you agree with Connor, or would you stick with Cover? You love Cover, so but his injury issues. Do we now? There's nothing to play for. Excuse me. Just don't play him, I guess. Or what do you think?
I mean, I'd love to see Chukwuemeka play. I think he's probably more likely to play if we played 4-3-3 though.
Yeah.
So I would. I mean, Kante could probably start. To be fair.
Yeah, he could. Yeah, it's been a while since I
mean. Yeah, in my predicted 11, I had Enzo and Kante, but if it's what I would want, probably Enzo and Cover. Probably a little bit of bias going in there, but yeah, no. But I'd love to see Chukwuemeka play as well, so I think either or, really, as long as he doesn't play Gallagher, which is probably actually what he's going to do.
Yeah. Chances are. Well, chances are he's probably not going to play a midfield 2. So, it will be very different in that position.
If it was this, though, like, Carney and Ruben, like, obviously, is not much, like, on that side. It's quite,
I mean, I guess it could be obviously flipped in that way, but...
Unfortunately, it would mean Enzo's playing more deeper, but that's what we've seen this year until we get a 6.
It means that no matter who plays anyway, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Kante is a shout. In a way, I would also like to, because Kante still hasn't signed his new contract either. If anything, maybe I would actually like to keep playing Kante to find out whether the guy can stay fit or not.
Is that really worth the risk, though?
If we're basing our decision of do we extend his contract or not on him being able to stay fit or not, I would say yes.
Yeah, but also, how bad would it be if he got injured in a dead rubber at the end of the season?
Yeah, it would be bad. I agree, but at this point, I don't know if resting makes him any less likely to get injured anymore.
You say that, but since Potter sort of brought him back in slower, reintegrated him slower, he's not been injured since. So, maybe it's just more about, I think for Kante, it's about managing his minutes. So, for me, I wouldn't actually even play Kante for the rest of the season, more or less. I don't think there's any point at this point, risking one of our best players getting injured again in a game that doesn't matter.
Fair, but couldn't you argue that point of how annoying would it be if they got injured in a dead rubber game for every player, whether that's Enzo or Fofana?
But it's different with Kante, isn't it? Because we know what he adds to the team, and you can say that about playing him in that case. But like you said, there's nothing to play for really. So I think it's a good chance to give someone else the minutes.
Who would you then pick next to Enzo? Would it be Carney? Would it be Gallagher? Would it be Cover? Who would you be if it's not Kante?
It'd be great to see Carney. I don't think it will be. I would also like to see Gallagher properly play there as well. Get a good run out. I quite like Gallagher. I think he'll probably get sold, and given that he's one of the players probably most in the shop window, I think it couldn't hurt to keep him playing as well, whereas Carney is very likely to still be here next season. So on that basis, I would say Gallagher.
Fair enough, I guess. So,
yeah, I've been outvoted. So
Pice didn't really have a final conclusion between Carney and Cover. I probably would have picked Kante. I get, even though you kind of slightly convinced me only in terms of, do you want to take that risk? I get it, but I'm like, once he signed a contract, I will agree with you. Just don't even play him. But until he has, I'm like, well, let's see if he can actually stay fit, because otherwise, why would we give him a new flipping contract? At the same time, we already got rid of Jorginho, so now we kind of have to. Otherwise, all our midfielders are about 12, so no one wants that. So I guess we'll just leave Carney on screen, because there have been 2 other shouts otherwise. So let's just leave it at that. We'll just have to wait and see what Frank does tomorrow. Front 3 then. And in particular, the one that's kind of in contention, is that the right term I used? Regardless. What do we do about up top? Because obviously Kai Havertz ain't available. Obviously Broja ain't available. So what do we do? Is it going to be Felix up top? Is it going to play Mudryk up top like Potter did once? Are we going to start Aubameyang for once? Dacho Fofana? He didn't play in the under-21s yesterday. I checked. I made sure, because I saw your tweet of like your team for tomorrow, and you had Dacho Fofana in there. I was like, okay, because I knew obviously you were coming on. I was like, okay, I need to find out if he played in the under-21s yesterday. And he didn't. So he's an option for tomorrow. Connor, you know what? I'll let you go first again. What would be your front 3?
So I would say Mudryk on the left, Felix through the middle, and Madueke on the right. I'd love to see Fofana, but I don't see it happening. Felix, I think you'll still play him, because again, he's sort of, you're still trying to make a decision on him. So, and I think he could play through the middle. He'll drift a lot, and it allows like Mudryk to come inside. So yeah, and then I want to see Mudryk and Madueke. They're expensive, young, direct wingers that have been signed by the club. So let's see them play, especially when it doesn't matter. Like, it's a good chance to get them some minutes in the Premier League and get really adjusted, ready for next season.
There you go. Let me just quickly take this off the screen to bring another tweet from Pice during Lampard's press conference up. He was asked, I don't know why they used Mudryk, but sure. On Mudryk, Madueke, and Chukwuemeka getting a chance, Lampard responded, if they deserve it. The thing I find so weird about that is, the game's tomorrow. So by now you should know whether they do. So you can't say if.
He's just keeping his cards close to his chest.
No, of course. I know that's what he's doing. And he was also asked about for the whole rest of the season rather than tomorrow specifically. But still, him saying that, using that terminology, makes me think neither Madueke or Chukwuemeka will get any minutes. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm like, well, so if they deserved it, they would have already gotten minutes. That makes me think he doesn't think they deserve it, therefore they still won't.
Can you see Mod's reply underneath?
Wait, let me scroll. Because he's right. Do you deserve this job? No, he doesn't.
That made me laugh.
I'll give him a like. He deserves it. Do you know what I mean? So I'll bring the lineup back up, but I wouldn't hate Connor's suggestion. Would I mind if we just go for Fofana up top instead of Felix? I wouldn't mind it. At the same time, do I ever see Dacho Fofana regularly playing for the first team of Chelsea Football Club? No. I think the second I think he will go on loan next season, and the second we buy a feeder club, that's where he will go to, and I don't think he'll ever see Chelsea colour again, personally. But I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, I guess. I hope he's the next superstar in terms is the next Harry Kane, but don't see it happening, really. Pice, front 3 for you. Would you agree with this? Would you play something different? Even if we don't think it's going to happen, would you like to see this happen?
I wouldn't be against it, to be fair, but I think personally we should prep Aubameyang ready for Arsenal next week.
Yeah,
trying to get him prepped. And Mudryk, to be fair, I want one of those to score against them next week. So
is that making you say Felix and Aubameyang instead of Madueke then?
I actually went with Mudryk, Aubameyang, and Madueke, but I would like to see Felix play, but I think Madueke, I want to see him more right now, just because we haven't seen him in a while. So yeah, I would like to give him a chance. I'd like to give Aubameyang a chance. Yeah, why not? Probably bring Felix. Probably would be the first sub up front.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because for Arsenal, I see that logic with Aubameyang, but didn't he play when we played Arsenal at home? And he
was terrible.
And you say give Aubameyang a chance. I feel like in terms of needing a chance, Aubameyang is the one that needs it the least, because we know the guy could score 20 goals between now and the end of the season and he would still leave. So why even do it? Why even risk us wanting to keep him? Do you know what I mean?
We need the goals.
Yeah, you're right, but I don't know. I don't trust him to score any more goals, but I know that's me, and others see that a bit differently. I get that. Ollie, you sticking to what I saw on your Twitter? Where was that to Fofana?
You know what I am? I'm going to stick with my guns. For me, Mudryk and Madueke need to be starting the rest of the games this season. I think Madueke at least deserves a chance. Mudryk, his performance against Brighton has earned a start, and nobody else in any in those positions is proving to be worth starting over them. For Fofana up front, it's just a case of like, in terms of Felix, he's 50-50 on whether he's going to be here next season. Aubameyang's definitely not going to be here next season, and with Havertz injured, he's kind of the only option for me in terms of just playing players who will almost certainly be here next season. The only one, obviously, with that is we do have Loftus-Cheek in the side where it's likely he'll be sold, but that's just down to James being injured. So
yeah. I mean, there is, I guess, a small case to be made for Sterling. If you say like Madueke should play every game until the end of the season. And now I might not be against selling Sterling, but I don't personally think that will happen. Even though apparently we're interested in like Leao, and we've talked to God knows who else for wingers.
Zaha
like,
as well.
Yeah, well, let's not even consider him, please. But the only way I could see us even contemplating a Leao situation is surely if Sterling leaves again. Even though I'd still find it stupid because Mudryk and Leao are heavily left-sided. So why would I want both?
That would spell the end for Pulisic as well, almost certainly, you'd have thought.
No, without a shadow of a doubt. But Sterling, I still have to expect him to be here next season. Now, Connor, I'll take it back to you, actually. You said Felix up top with Mudryk and Madueke. The other guys have now mentioned Aubameyang and Fofana. Have they either convinced you of anything but Felix? Or if they haven't, between Fofana and Aubameyang, who would you pick between those two?
Yeah, see, I was never against like the idea of sort of like Fofana. I'd actually like to see Fofana. He's a more natural 9. We bought him, even though it was 10 million. We bought him for that reason. He's young and he can progress. And whether he makes it at Chelsea long term or whether he drives up his value and we sell him on, I'd like to see Fofana over Aubameyang. Personally, I think the Aubameyang thing. Again, I rate him, his career-wise, I rate him as a forward. I think he scored a lot of important goals and he was good at Arsenal, of course, and Dortmund. Even Barcelona he was scoring. But I think no matter what he does now in a Chelsea shirt, it's over next season. So I think if you're going to pick between the two of them, I think you go for Fofana because at least he has a future at the club. Obviously, that's very contradictory with someone like Felix.
It's about the sunk cost, I think, because, at this point, Fofana is going to be the one who's going to be here next season, and Aubameyang just isn't. With Fofana as well, can you imagine if he gets to start? It's very unlikely, but if he got to start all 7 games that we have left, how much of a boost actually would that be able to give him in terms of knowing what to expect in match sharpness, all the rest of it, when it actually does come time for him to go off and be part of a feeder club for a little while, allows him to kick on in France or whatever. Yeah, so, I think any time that we can give to any of the youngsters isn't necessarily a bad thing at all. I even contemplated saying about maybe we should play Lewis Hall in midfield. But, I think maybe it's a little too soon for him. I don't know.
He also played yesterday too.
Yeah, that's true.
He's played that more than Carney Chukwuemeka, but yeah, he did play yesterday. So it's a good job. And I've asked Connor that question because I don't know. I think all 3 options in Felix, Fofana, and Aubameyang have their validation as to why I should pick them now that Kai isn't available. And I know, I mean, Isaac says maybe I'm too harsh on Fofana. Maybe I am, but the guy isn't even young anymore. I think the best thing he's done is play in flipping Norway. Like, he's young, but not, he's not 17, 18. He's like already past 20. Isn't he already 21 maybe? Like,
he's not been great for the under-21s, but whenever he has played in the first team, he's actually looked all right. So, I don't know, maybe he's someone who rises to the occasion.
He's got some grit about him as well.
I know everyone said he was good in the game he played against, was it Southampton, I think?
Yeah, I think it was.
I didn't think he was.
He also missed the sitter, to be fair.
To be honest. Yeah, that was...
Yeah, but who hasn't this season?
No, that's also true. It's also true. He's only missed less sitters than Felix. Obviously, Felix has a lot more chances, but I don't know. It's a tough one. And yeah, this one, by the way, I mean, we don't have to talk about it as a whole, but just from our opinion, this pisses me off so much that we even consider this. The guy told us to F off last season. Can we please not sign players that told us to go do one and pick other clubs over us? Please no. That's like in 3 years if we go back to Nagelsmann. No, you already told us to go do one once. I'm not coming to ask again.
Yeah, if we need a holding midfielder actually in summertime, that Jorginho looks pretty good. Plays for
exactly.
Arsenal.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like bloody John Obi Mikel. Doesn't he still play?
Yeah, Mikel. Yeah.
I tell you what, right? I watched Roma the other day. Matic was still on smoke.
Mate, yeah, he was.
He
He absolutely was. That triple tackle was insane.
He might be the most Mourinho player I've ever seen. Followed him to 3 separate clubs.
I couldn't believe my eyes. He was actually still good. I was like, what?
Yeah, with his stupid spider legs. Man, I hate the guy as well. By the way, Paisa, you said earlier, the whole Nagelsmann had his issue with our recruitment process. Well, if he goes to Spurs, I'm not quite sure if their recruitment process is any fucking better. So I'm not sure if Nagelsmann's opinion is then anything to consider at all. Because if you think Spurs is any valid option, I don't know what to think of him anymore now. But yeah, I guess I'll pick Fofana. Therefore, it's 2 for Fofana. So we'll go with that. At the end of the day, like I say, we don't know what Frank is going to pick tomorrow anyway. And to finish it off, boys, just lastly, score prediction. Ollie, I'll start with you. What do you reckon? Do you reckon we'll get to 40 points? Do we even get to 42? Or is it going to be another day of misery?
Very possibly. I hate to bet against us, so I don't. I'm going to go with a 1-0 victory for us.
I like it. Connor, what about you? Do you sit the same boat as Ollie in terms of not liking to bet against ourselves?
I don't at all, but I am going to say 1-1. I think that's just what I've got in my head. I think 1-1. So, yeah.
Fair. All right. 1-0, 1-0. Can't talk. 1-0, 1-0. Pice, what about you? You going to make the set complete and predict the defeat, or are you going to go along with any of the boys?
2-1 Brentford.
All right.
You could see it.
So at least I can't pick something new then.
You could say 2-2, then we've all gone up.
I could do. Or 0-0, make it even worse. Fun Wednesday afternoon, evening when we would all much rather watch City Arsenal. But, is what it is. What am I going to say? Nah, I'm a bit like Ollie, I don't like betting against. Seeing the first day against Madrid, I think I said 1-0 Madrid, but with the thought, we could still turn around a second. So if it's only a one-off game, I don't like betting against us. So, yeah, I'm going to say 2-1. It's just we don't feel like a clean sheet. We have Tony against us. Doesn't scream clean sheet to me. So do we sound like scoring 2 goals? Not at all. But I'm going to say 2-1 and, cross my fingers that and hope it happens. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to round this one out. I would told the boys it's going to be about an hour and a half. Here we are at nearly 2 hours. This is unfortunately how it goes. So big shout out to all my guests. Please follow them all on their socials down in the description below. Please follow Connor. Of course, please follow Connor on Twitter. He's down below. Follow Ollie on Twitter for his private, as you can see, Ollie J. Carpenter. And, of course, his podcast at The Bridge Pod. Check that out check out the Twitter and let the link tree take you to all sorts of platforms, wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, Pice by now, but still check out his website, londonsfirst.com, which Connor also writes for. So, even more reason to check out London's First. And, of course, follow Pice on Twitter for your latest Chelsea news to know when Pochettino will be appointed as Chelsea manager. I did start a poll in the chat, how people felt about Pochettino becoming the new Chelsea manager. And I gave you the option between happy, indifferent, annoyed, and unsure for now. And after 612 votes, happy did win with 47%, indifferent on 20%, unsure for now on 23%, and annoyed is actually only at 10%, which, I respect the positivity. Or just the opinions, regardless.
I think the whole thing around Poch is just cautious optimism, isn't it?
Yeah, or just cautious.
Prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
or just caution, full stop. Who knows? But yeah, there you go. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for watching. Appreciate you all. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. That'd be fantastic. Hit the like button if you haven't already done that either. It'd be wonderful. It doesn't cost you any money or any time. So please do. Helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. Spreads these streams out to more people. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Up to Chelsea, upwards and onwards. And we'll see you next time.